Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The Browns open the preseason Friday night in Jacksonville and plan to start Deshaun Watson at quarterback. Now they just have to hope he doesn't get hit with an indefinite suspension that keeps him off the field. Here to discuss all things Browns is Dave Chudowsky of Go, the WKYC Morning News. Hey, Chud, how are you, bud?
Scott, I'm good. Ready for some football finally. I mean, we might not have any resolution over Watson, but at least we know we're going to see some football, even though it's preseason football. But I think everyone's ready to roll. And what do you feel like? What's the vibe around the team and the fans at camp? Are they ready to get going against another team?
Yeah, I mean, the players always are. I'm struggling to kind of put my finger on how much this Deshaun Watson uncertainty is or isn't affecting the team. You talk to Kevin Stefanski and he keeps a stiff upper lip, and you talk to some of the key members of the team and they're saying all the right things and the focus is on practice. But I think it's just human for it to be a cloud over everything. And I'm not saying it shows up during a given play or even a given practice, but I do think it just kind of follows everything that the organization is doing. So having said that, I do think they'll be able to put it out of their heads for Friday night, right? To go down to Jacksonville. I know it's, even though the games are, can be boring or can be uneventful, and the starters will probably only play a couple of series. It is a chance for them to play, and it is a chance to see Deshaun Watson, which, I'm sure it's like anything with Watson. It's met with, mixed emotions from some of the fans. I'm sure a good chunk of the fan base is really excited to see him in a Browns jersey, and I think his teammates probably are. I mean, they see him every day in practice, but preseason is different. But even the excitement is offset by the realization that this could be the last time that Browns fans see him for all of 2022. He might be indefinitely suspended, and that includes all of this season. So that's part of the reason the Browns want to play him. We can talk about whether or not they should even be playing him if he's not going to, be available until next year or late this year. But I just can't get away from that being the backdrop.
Yeah, no doubt. Let me ask you this. How do you think he's going to perform? I mean, it's been a while since we've seen him. We mentioned the days this morning on the show. I think it was 580 days. I can't remember exactly, but I know, right? It was the last week of the 2020 season. I mean, that's a long time. And also mentally, how is all of this affecting him? I mean, he's only human, right? So you got to figure, that it won't be normal. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, it was January 3rd, 2021 was the last time he played in a game. I think physically he'll be fine. He's out there every day at practice, and it's not the same as games, but, he's now had the entire offseason program and 2 weeks of training camp where I think he'll be fine physically. Now, not everything's been perfect at training camp. There's some interceptions, there's some missed throws. That happens to everybody. My guess is he's not as sharp as he'd like to be, and that part of that comes from playing in games and, getting hit, right? The guy hasn't been hit in a long time because quarterbacks don't get hit in practice or training camp. And you feel the live rush is different than when Myles Garrett pulls up, because that's what they do in training camp. So, there'll probably be an adjustment there. Mentally, it's tougher for me to figure out, Chud. And part of that is because, I haven't been around him much, right? I've talked to him twice in big group interviews, and he hasn't talked to us since June 14th. And much of the discussion when we have talked to him those two times is all about, his legal situation. So I don't know him well enough, not nearly well enough to say, yeah, he's the kind of guy that compartmentalizes this kind of thing. And I don't know, this kind of thing is probably a terrible phrase. If he can compartmentalize something as serious as this and something that, affects him like this does, and might even cost him all of this season. When you ask Coach Kevin Stefanski about it or his teammates, they say the focus is good and he's the first one in, last one out, and he's done a good job putting that aside when he's in the building. But I do think that the game in Jacksonville Friday night will be a good barometer for that, and just see how quickly he's able to think. He probably gets booed in Jacksonville. Not that the crowd will be big, but I would expect there to be boos. Maybe there's even signs. I think that's something for sure. If he plays or when he plays in Pittsburgh or Baltimore or Cincinnati, you'll see that kind of thing. So it is interesting to see how he will handle everything. I'm sure I would think Kevin Stefanski would have the top first 5 or 10 plays scripted, and maybe he's able to go down and move the ball and looks like they want him to look. But it will be interesting to watch. And I do think I've gone back and forth on this. I do think I guess it is necessary that the Browns play him. I do think it's necessary the Browns play him. I don't think there's any doubt about that, especially given the fact that maybe he won't be able to play again until next year. I do question why they're giving him and continue to giving him almost all the first team reps in practice when the odds are like 99.5% that Jacoby Brissett's going to be the starter week 1. And probably for the foreseeable future, unless they make a big move at quarterback. So
that's a great point. Why are they doing that?
Yeah, I think it's twofold, Chud. I think number one is they want to establish Deshaun Watson as their franchise quarterback. And the way you do that is by giving him the first team reps. And it may hurt you in the short term, right? Because Jacoby Brissett is not getting all those reps in order to get to week 1. But the Browns say, okay, he's still getting a bunch of reps with the twos. And at some point, they'll make the switch. And it might be as soon as Sunday after this preseason opener, where all of a sudden it's Brissett's team, right? And now the focus is getting him ready for the start of the season. But so I think they wanted to establish Watson as, hey, he's going to be the guy long term. Let's have his first training camp and his first offseason. He's going to be the guy. So I think that's part of it. And I think the other part is didn't play at all last year. New system, new teammates. He needs to get ready. And with the thought that he could play this season, right? And, it was only, 2 weeks ago, less than, that Sue Robinson said a 6-game suspension, right? So if he were to come back week 7, which seems less and less likely given the appeal, then you have to get him ready to play. And that means getting him a bunch of snaps with new teammates, new system. So I think those are both the reasons to play him as much as they have, or to give him as many first-team reps as he's gotten. But, and Kevin Stefanski says he will make that switch, and I think that switch has to come sooner or later. And I'm saying that expecting the suspension to be, 12 games or 17 games, right? If it's only 8, then you're getting back to kind of those parallel tracks where you got to get both guys ready. But, assuming it's going to be a really lengthy suspension, then I think starting Sunday, you make the switch to Jacoby Brissett, and that includes the joint practices, next Thursday and Friday against the Eagles, where Brissett will be with the first team. Those are intense practices where, I think those first team reps count even more.
How has Brissett looked to you so far in camp?
Not great. I did think he might have had his best practice. All these days run together. Tuesday, the last time we were out in Berea. I thought that might have been his best practice. He made some really nice throws. I thought he was decisive in the red zone. Had a couple back-to-back touchdown throws. Threw a real nice seam or nice fade route down the sideline for a long completion. And Watson had a similar throw. I think Watson's was to David Njoku and Brissett's was to Javon Wims. He hasn't looked where you say, okay, this guy's going to go win 12 games, right? I mean, and I don't think anybody should have those expectations. And nothing I've seen in camp says yes. Now I think he's, oh my gosh, this guy's way better than I thought he was. But, you look at his track record and he doesn't throw interceptions and he makes good decisions with the ball. And that's what Kevin Stefanski wants out of a quarterback. And if you can do that and you can run the ball, run the crap out of the ball and play stifling defense, it gives you a chance to win a lot of games, or it keeps you in a lot of games. It gives you a chance to win those games. So I think that's what the Browns will be looking for with Brissett. Now there's still going to come, games where you got to go win in the fourth quarter. And we saw that, that might've been Baker Mayfield's biggest downfall, that he was 0 for 5 with the chance to win games late last year. So, Brissett's going to have to do that if the Browns are going to surprise me and probably surprise a lot of people by going to the playoffs if Jacoby Brissett's the starter all season. And, if Deshaun Watson's suspended for the whole season, then I think the Browns make some kind of move. I think they should go after Jimmy Garoppolo, and then, Jacoby Brissett probably doesn't start all season long. But getting back to it, I think he's been fine for a backup quarterback, but he's certainly not blown me away.
How have the guys responded to him so far? I mean, because does it seem like is there a drop off, or do you notice anything different when the quarterbacks, the two different guys are in there?
Yeah, no, you don't. I mean, I think you do from a talent perspective, right? I mean, Deshaun Watson's a top whatever quarterback, and I keep saying that. Whatever it's 5, 8, 10, whatever it is. Jacoby Brissett's probably a top 5, 8 backup in this league, but yeah, it's a big drop off, right? You go from 8 to 40. But from how the operation runs, how teammates relate to him, I don't think there's a big drop off. And I guess a silver lining, if you want to put it that way, everyone knew when Deshaun Watson got traded here that he was likely going to miss time. So therefore, Jacoby Brissett walks in, and the Browns got him for this reason, because there's a high trust level. And his teammates look at him like, okay, this guy's going to be the guy. It's not like, oh, we don't need to worry. This guy's a backup. We're not interested in what he's got to do, or we'll deal with that if and when he has to play. There was a harsh reality that this guy's going to play, and he's probably going to play week 1. So I think that helps your teammates look at you in a certain way. Plus, he carries himself like a leader and like a starter, and he has enough starts under his belt that there's some, cachet that goes with Jacoby Brissett. I think his resume is strong enough that the teammates look at him and go, okay, this guy's done it before. So I don't think there's a drop off. And I think from a personality perspective, and we've talked to plenty of guys about this, plenty of his teammates about this, he carries himself like a starter, and that goes a long way. So I think from that perspective, he's got what you need. He just doesn't have the, athleticism of Deshaun Watson. He doesn't have the playmaking ability of Deshaun Watson. And I don't think he has the explosive plays in the pass or the run that Deshaun Watson has shown throughout his career. That's just not who Jacoby Brissett is, either from a skill set level and a probably thinking level, right? He manages the game, and maybe he does that because he doesn't have those physical traits, or maybe he does that because, when you're a backup, and I talked to Josh Rosen about this a little bit, when you're a backup, the coaches really just want you to make good decisions, right? They don't want you to kind of blow up their game plan by taking risks. And so maybe Brissett, because he's largely been a backup, and when he started, a couple times he's been forced into that through injury or through Andrew Luck's retirement. If you have that, okay, I got to be really careful with the ball mindset. It's different than if you're kind of a freewheeling starter that is trying to put up big numbers or expected to put up big numbers, if that makes sense.
Sure. All right. I want to, before the end of this, I want to go back to preview the game and talk about the game one last time. But let's save that for the end. Let people hold off for that. Let's just talk about this past week in camp since we spoke the last time, and hit on two very big things. Before we get to those two very big things, though, the depth chart came out, right?
Yeah.
Anything you want to talk about there? Any surprises? I mean, sometimes, I've heard that, it's just PR guys that put out those depth charts, and you don't really look into it. Is there anything that fans should know? Have they not looked at that yet?
Not really, Chud. I didn't think anything jumped out at me greatly. They list Johnny Stanton IV as a tight end. And he's more of a fullback, and it makes me wonder if they're going to have a fullback this year, because they're kind of thin at tight end, and so maybe Stanton makes the roster as a hybrid, and then when Stefanski wants to go with a true fullback, 5 times a game, he can do that, and when he doesn't want to do that, he can flex Stanton out to tight end. But I thought that was interesting. There was nobody behind Jakeem Grant Sr. and we'll talk about him, but there's nobody behind him on the depth chart. So now the Browns have to figure out who's going to be the kick returner and punt returner. And that's a big question mark. when they thought they had a huge upgrade in Jakeem Grant Sr. And then, I thought it was interesting that the only shared starter role went at middle linebacker to Jacob Phillips and Anthony Walker Jr. And the coaches are portraying it as a competition. Obviously, that's how the depth chart is. I think part of that is because Anthony Walker is such a team leader that nobody wants to just take that job away from him before he's lost it. He was hurt to start camp. He had a groin injury, so Jacob Phillips got all the first-team reps. Anthony Walker finally got some first-team reps Tuesday. But, he's on a one-year contract. It's a second straight one-year contract. Jacob Phillips, the Browns drafted in the third round in 2020. It feels like they want him to be the guy. And he's faster than Walker. Not that Walker's slow, because Walker is fast. But Phillips is faster. And I think they want Phillips to play a bunch, but they're reluctant to just hand him the job, probably for multiple reasons, one of which is they really respect Anthony Walker. So I thought that was worth noting, just that they decided to kind of, split the baby a little bit, even though Phillips, through injury or not, has gotten almost all the first-team reps.
All right, the two big stories I want to hit now, and you just touched on one there. We're going to go backwards on a timeline, but Jakeem Grant, Achilles injury, out for the year. Big loss for this team, isn't it? I mean, that he was having a great camp. He was brought in with huge expectations, that you had already mentioned. So, you always want to get through camp without suffering injuries like these. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. This is a big one, right?
It's huge. And, huge is a word I fall back on. But it's really significant, Chud. And, part of me says, oh, how big a deal can the returner be, right? But I think it's a big deal. I do. And a lot of the reason I think that is because we've seen the return game the last few years not have any explosion to it. And that limits you as a team, right? You don't have great field position. There's no kind of hope when there's a kickoff or a punt return that, maybe we get an easy touchdown, right? Maybe we get great field position and the offense doesn't have to go 70 yards. That, when I'm watching these games, that's never in my head, because the Browns just haven't done it. Whether it's Donovan Peoples-Jones or Demetric Felton or Anthony Schwartz in limited action last year, or Dearness Johnson, or whoever it's been, right? They just haven't had that threat back there. And that's what Jakeem Grant was supposed to change, because Jakeem Grant has 6 career return touchdowns. He was a Pro Bowler last year. And all of a sudden, the Browns are going back to just guys, right? Just guys returning it, where you hope they don't turn it over, right? That becomes the number one goal is, all right, catch it and don't fumble it. And it's a whole different mindset. And I'm sure Mike Prefer, the special teams coordinator, is devastated, because it happens Tuesday, right? The injury happens Tuesday. And Sunday, Grant talked and Prefer talked, and just how excited they were to have him and to change the scope of that return game. So I think it's huge. And I think the other level of that is, or the other layer of that is, if the Browns don't have Deshaun Watson, they're going to have to win on the margins. And that includes dominating special teams. And it's really hard to dominate special teams if you don't have a big time kick returner. And, I just don't see, we've seen those guys. We've seen Felton. We've seen Donovan Peoples-Jones, right? I mean, maybe, undrafted rookie Mike Harley Jr. comes out of nowhere, right? But, maybe Anthony Schwartz finds it because he's got that elite speed. But I've seen nothing to make me believe that anybody else they have on the roster is going to come close to what my expectations were for Grant.
Sure, no doubt.
And he plays receiver. And, Judd, we've talked about the question marks at receiver.
Right.
Grant had looked good at receiver. He gives you an option out of the slot. And now I think that's just one more question about the depth at such a key position, because I really do think he was going to have some role. And now the Browns are scrambling, and maybe they have to keep one more receiver on that 53-man roster and steal from somewhere else because Grant would have filled both, where he would have filled 3 roles. And now I would say those 3 roles are kind of up for grabs.
Yeah, no doubt. Before I get to the other big story, real quick, Jedrick Wills talked this week, right? And he talked about, speaking of injuries, his injury last year and how that affected him. Any insight on that?
Yeah, I talked to him right at the end of minicamp, and I don't know if we talked about it on this podcast or not, but I really liked where he was from a mindset perspective. He knows it's a huge year for him, year 3. Bill Callahan, the line coach, told me that Jed needs to take a quantum leap in year 3. So there's some pressure there. But, and you still need to see it on the field, and he still has his issues with Myles Garrett in training camp. But everybody would have their issues with Myles Garrett, so I don't know if that's a fair gauge or not. But, he showed some toughness last year by playing through that injury. He said he was at 50% early on before he sat out a couple games, and it was able to heal a little bit, that ankle injury. So he needs to be at a high level for this team and this line to be where we think it can be, right? We talk about that offensive line being such a strength. Well, he needs to play really well for that line to be where we think it can be, because the left tackle is such a pivotal spot. So when we talk about key players this year, he is high on that list. I like what I've heard and seen from him, but he's got to stay healthy, and then he's got to show better play and maybe a little better. I don't know if motivation's the right word, but you need to really see it from him. Finish plays. He told me that last year, because I asked him, I said, it didn't feel like you finished plays. You block a guy for X number of seconds and then kind of be done. And he said a lot of that was because he didn't want to get hurt, because he already had the ankle and he didn't want to get rolled into again, because, it limits his play so much when he gets hurt, that he was really conscious of bodies around his feet. So maybe he'll just be, maybe he'll just have a much better mindset if he's healthy this year, and he says he is healthy. And maybe that'll make all the difference.
All right. Now I want to talk about Kareem Hunt. And, I just hate seeing stuff like this, because we always talk about the drama and things in Berea. And it's just, obviously we have enough to deal with there on Deshaun Watson's situation. Yeah. I think my situation with Kareem Hunt, and before I give my opinion, just explain to anyone who might not know exactly what happened in that 2-day period, right? He had to sit in, I guess is what they're calling it, right?
Hold in, sit in, some kind of silent protest. Yeah. He, there were 2 days at the end of last week. I want to say Friday and Saturday, where he went through individual drills. And, Chud is part of the writers. We check off, or the media, we check off everybody who's in practice, right? Just so there's not somebody missing, and there's 90 bodies. So, it takes a while. You go through everybody. But you do that when it's stretching and individual drills. So, because that's when it's easier to spot everybody. They're broken off in their own position. So Kareem Hunt's there. We check him off. And then, you're watching team drills, and, sometimes guys don't, do a drill, or they only get a couple of reps, or there's a reason the guy's not practicing in team drills. Well, anyway, Kareem Hunt doesn't practice in team drills Friday and Saturday. Then it comes out that he's doing that on purpose, that he is sitting out himself, and there's not any reason. He's doing it because he wants a new contract. I mean, that is the reason. It's not an injury related or team. It's him saying, I'm not going to go through these team drills because I want a contract extension. Then he asked for a trade. The Browns say no. And Kevin Stefanski says, you either practice the whole practice or you don't practice. So Hunt was back out there Sunday. He was back out there Tuesday, going through the entire practice. I don't think his trade request has gone away. I don't see any sign from the Browns that they're going to honor it. Maybe somebody blows their doors off with a trade offer. Andrew Berry would change his mind. But now the thought is that they want Kareem Hunt, and he doesn't have much leverage, and he's under contract, so he's got to practice and he's got to play. And if you don't do that, then you get fined, and there's other repercussions. So it'll be interesting to see how Hunt handles this, because I think, and I want to hear what you have to say, Chad. I think at his core, he plays hard. He plays with reckless abandon. He grew up here. He wants to win games for this team. He wants his family and friends to see a Super Bowl. Like he's talked about it a million times. So I think when push comes to shove and you get to week 1 or even you get to Friday night in Jacksonville, he's going to be Kareem Hunt. That doesn't mean he doesn't want a contract. Doesn't mean he doesn't think he could find more opportunities, find more money somewhere else. I just don't think he has any leverage to force the Browns to do that. So I think he'll wind up kind of sucking it up and doing what he's always done. But it's something certainly to keep an eye on, because I don't think the Browns are going to budge from a contract extension perspective. And I don't think they're going to budge from a trade perspective. So then it's up to Kareem Hunt to compartmentalize, and we'll see if he's able to do that.
I think what bugs me about it is, and I'm a big Kareem Hunt fan from the past, covered him high school football, Friday Night Fever on Channel 3.
Yeah.
One of the best high school running backs I've ever seen. Drafted him in fantasy football his first year with the Chiefs. You know, he was a sleeper and it came through. You know, I've always, you know, been a fan of his. Obviously, though, not a fan of his off the field issue that he had.
Sure.
And I guess what bugs me is he has his off-field incident, right, with the woman. And then you see him in a police car and, you know, basically begging for another chance, right? Isn't that accurate to say? Like, he got
caught. He got caught with weed in the car, right?
Yeah. It just bothers me that he can get a second chance like he did and then pull this stunt. And I guess, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say the Browns did him a favor or anything, because obviously the Browns did what they did because they want to, obviously, they're not just doing it to try to better him as a man. Obviously, they'll say that, but it's a business, right? The Browns want him to help their franchise. So I get that. But still, I mean, the Browns did give him another chance. And then it just, I don't understand. Like, am I wrong here? It just kind of rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, I think that's a completely valid point, Chud. I really do. I think all those points, are good points. I would say what I think has changed is, okay, Kareem thinks he's been, you know, whatever, a good citizen, for lack of a better term, the last couple of years. So, okay, you know, I think he's put that behind him, even though it's not that long ago. You know, it's 2019 when the Browns signed him. And I also think a factor is if you're Kareem or Kareem's agent, right, you can't take the agent out of the equation. And he could be getting bad advice or good advice, however you want to look at it.
Right.
You know, maybe it's not all Kareem's idea to not practice or not go through team drills. But I think a factor is, well, geez, the Browns just paid Deshaun Watson $230 million. And he's got, you know, comparatively speaking, and I hate the comparisons, but if you're Kareem, you could be thinking, this guy's got way bigger issues than I have, right? And they're still going on. And mine was, you know, an isolated incident, even though it was 2 off-field altercations, one with the woman in the hotel that he shoved and pushed. But look at Deshaun Watson. He's still in the middle of this, and the Browns committed to pay him $230 million. Therefore, my, you know, incident that I feel like is years away and I've turned over a new leaf, why should that keep me from getting paid by the same organization? And, you know, obviously quarterbacks and running backs are different. And I think that's the bottom line. It's not, I don't think it's a, you know, morality thing. I think quarterbacks get paid a bunch of money and the second running back on the team does not get paid a bunch of money. So, but I do think that those are factors in Hunt and or his agent saying, all right, now is the time that we're going to try to make a stand. But I get everything you're saying, Chud, and I completely understand if fans feel that way too. Like, hey, this guy was given a second chance by this organization when he was down and out and didn't have a whole lot of teams calling him. All of a sudden he's going to, quote unquote, hold out when he's still going to get paid $6 million this year. I get that would rub people the wrong way.
I think you make some good points there. I kind of thought about the fact that your first point with, you know, it's been a few years and, you know, I did kind of think of that, but that's a good point. And the Watson issue, I mean, yeah, that, you know, you make good points there. So I can kind of tread back a little bit and see where Kareem's coming from. But now this is where what is his contract? What is it last year? Because they did give him another deal, right? After his original deal?
Yeah, in 2020, they gave him a 2-year extension.
Yeah.
Ran through 2022, right? It was 2
Okay.
years at I think it was 12, but he could get to 13, depending on incentives. So that's, just you take it as baseline, it's $6 million a year. That's a lot of money for a second running back. I think it was a lot of money for a guy with Kareem's history. Now, the Browns probably look at it as hey, this guy's he's probably going to be on his best behavior as he's ever going to be. They had stuff in the contract that it could get out of, obviously, if he violated something. So maybe the Browns felt hey, it was a bargain, right? Because he's a really good player and he's probably worth more than $6 million.
Yeah.
The difference, the dynamic here is that Nick Chubb is getting paid $14 million, right? Or 12 point at average. It comes out to 12.2, I think, a year on his extension. So you just can't. It's awfully difficult for a team to pay 2 running backs big money, and I think the Browns staggered the 2 deals where they were never paying both of them big money. But come next year, I just don't see a way that they feel like they can pay Kareem. Let's say he wants $7 or $8 million a year. I don't see how you can do that on top of what Nick Chubb is getting paid. I feel like the Browns always knew this would be Kareem's last year, and maybe Kareem just realized that, or maybe he's okay, it's reality now. Let's see what I can do about it. And if he went somewhere else, maybe he would be the number 1 back, so his stats would be bigger. So when he hit the free agent market, he would have a better chance at a bigger contract. I mean, those are realities, and I understand that thinking. But I just don't think the Browns are going to cave. I don't think they should cave. And I think he's better off trying to put up as good a numbers as he can as the number 2. And there will still be a market for him. But I don't think the market's going to be as big as he thinks it is, because he just turned 27, so he'll be 28 next year. He does have the off-field baggage that we talked about. And running backs aren't getting a ton of money, right? They just don't. So, I think it's a tough spot for him to be in financially. I mean, tough spot, $6 million, right? But I think he's going to wind up being disappointed with whatever contract he winds up signing whenever he signs a new contract.
Yeah, and in these days, NFL lifespan is not as long as it used to be. The shelf life, right?
No, I mean, look at the running backs that get paid, right? It's Chubb, McCaffrey, Henry, Zeke. I mean, there's not a lot of guys to get paid big money, and the teams that pay them are usually the teams they're on, right? Because they've already proven themselves with that team. There's a lot of value. The fans want to see them there. You don't see a lot of running backs hit the free agent market and sign huge deals. It just they're just you can find a Dearness Johnson, right? That's how free agents feel, or that's how teams feel about running backs.
Yeah. No, so some in the national media wonder if the Browns would even, hold on to him this year, with drafting a running back and having depth there. So, all right, let's move on here. Let's put a wrap on this and talk about the game.
Yeah.
Coming up, we're taping this on Thursday, coming up on Friday night. Number one, I saw Stefanski said that they're going to be doing some team building things. What's that all about?
I don't know. I don't know if they're going bowling or they're going to, hit balls at TPC Sawgrass. But he feels like, okay, they're in Berea the whole time. They're not off site, right? Pittsburgh goes to Latrobe, teams go other places. So they're on site. He feels like this is a good time for some team building. So they went down yesterday. So they went down Wednesday. They'll come back either late Friday or Saturday. So it's time for them to be together as a group. They're going to do some stuff around Jacksonville, whatever it is. I think it's probably just also a way to break up. Training camp gets old, so that's a way to break it up.
All right, what's your let's preview the game. I mean, if you
I
could
thought you
do
could
that
ask me for a prediction. I'm like, Jesus, Chud, you can't ask me for a preseason prediction.
No prediction. Just I guess how long do you think the starters will play, and what are you looking for? What are Petrak's points on point with Petrak?
I mean, I think it's 2 series, maybe 3. Maybe if they score on the first series, it'll only be 1. I do think the Watson factor plays into this, that they want to get him some time. So whether that's 2 or 3 series remains to be seen. If you're playing him, you're probably playing a good chunk of your starting offensive line, maybe not everybody. I don't know if like a guy like Myles Garrett will play. I think that's they probably don't want to risk him getting hurt. I think Greg Newsome doesn't play because he left practice the other day. He stayed on the field, but he looked like he tweaked a hamstring. He was stretching, and the trainers were stretching him, the athletic trainers. But he never left the field. He never had it wrapped. But it doesn't make any sense to play him if he's dealing with anything at all. It's all about Watson early. And then, I think a lot of it's, I think you want to see Jacoby Brissett, right? We talked about him a bunch earlier, but you want to see how he looks, even if he's playing with the second team, because you know that he's going to be the guy week 1 unless something drastic happens, whether it's, Jimmy G. But even if they trade for Jimmy G or sign Jimmy G, I wouldn't think he'd be ready to go week 1. So you want to see how your week 1 starter is going to look. You want to look at the other 2 guys, the other 2 quarterbacks, Dobbs and Rosen. See if one of them can be your backup week 1. I don't see that. I see the Browns having to go find somebody else, whether it's Garoppolo or whoever it is. I don't think you can go into week 1 with Rosen and or Dobbs behind Brissett. It just doesn't feel deep enough to me. But maybe they blow you away in the preseason. And I'm not going to talk about it, but I did write about Josh Rosen. I sat down with him the other day. I thought it was an interesting interview. You can find the story at brownzone.com. And then I want to look at the returners, right? You can't tell anything about returners in training camp. There's just never full speed return drills, which makes sense. Guys get hurt, whatever. So that's what the preseason's for. So maybe somebody stands out. Maybe somebody wins a job by returning a kickoff or a punt. I do think that's worth watching. Backup tight end, we talked about a little bit with Stanton. You got Njoku and Harrison Bryant, and then it's a fall off. Well, somebody's going to have to be that 3rd tight end and maybe even 4th tight end. Miller Forrestall, does he do anything? This undrafted guy, Zaire Mitchell Payton, has made 2 touchdown catches recently in camp. Maybe he continues it in the preseason. And then the rookies. That's the last thing is you want to see how the rookies look, the draft picks, right? How does Martin Emerson look at corner? How does Alex Wright, the defensive end? Does he get a sack? Does he get any pressure on Trevor Lawrence? He might start. If Myles Garrett doesn't play, and Clowney might not play, maybe Alex Wright starts. Maybe he can get a sack of Trevor Lawrence and kind of give him some confidence. David Bell, I don't know if he'll play the receiver because he had that foot injury to start camp. But if he plays, how's he coming along? So a lot about those rookies. Jerome Ford, the running back, he's looked good in training camp. Can he carry it over into the preseason? So, as boring as some of these games can be, there is stuff to watch. And, a lot of that for me will be once we get past Deshaun Watson and the quarterbacks, a lot of that will be the rookies.
All right. We've waited a long time, but football is back and we are ready. Browns and Jags, Friday night, preseason first game. Looking forward to it. And we'll talk more. We'll talk about that and more next week, I'm sure. Right, Scott?
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about that. Hopefully we'll have Deshaun Watson resolution at some point. I don't know, it could happen before Friday night. If it does, maybe we got to rehuddle. But that's hanging over everything. But that resolution will come at some point. We'll have the preseason game, and then we'll get joint practices with the Eagles. And those are always the best practices to watch, right? Because it's a lot of ones versus ones. You get this, it's extended period of time. And then I don't think the starter's going to play at all in that preseason game against the Eagles. So, they go hard during those 2 sessions. So there's a lot coming up here that we'll have to digest. And then it's today. I just looked at the laptop calendar, Chud. It says August 11th, which means the season opener in Carolina is 1 month from today. So things will get going downhill in a hurry here.
Baker, Baker, Baker.
I know. How about that?
All right.
Cool. Thanks, Chud. I appreciate this. Thanks, everybody, for listening. You can read all my work at brownzone.com. And this has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast. Thanks for listening.